Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Honey and Stag literary event. Tonight's literary event is the kind of event that just makes you want to pop a champagne cork or some fizzy water because it's a time of celebration. We're here for a book launch. And what I'd like to do to continue is welcome the author into the studio, CJ Dunford.
Hello.
Hello, hello. I'm going to call you CJ Dunford just for a moment because we're here to celebrate the launch of your latest book, Fake News. And we should say that by no means is this a fake novel, far from it. I mean, this is authentic writing. But from now on, CJ Dunford, I'm going to call you Caroline. Caroline, well done on the publication and the launch of this book. How are you feeling?
It's really nice. It feels really amazing to sort of like it's going to be out in the world. It's been a great process. It's been really smooth all the way through, and it's been an idea that just would not leave me alone.
Could you do something for me? Could you hold your book up, because I read an e-copy, so I don't have a book, but there's nothing like, look at that glorious cover. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, just to say to people who are watching, thank you for joining us. And should you wish to put comments, should you wish to put any questions for Caroline, please feel free to pop those in the chat there, and we'll deal with those as we go along. So, Fake News. I mean, the title, and we'll come to the title in due course, but it is certainly not the kind of thing that I know you previously, the kind of things that you write. Fake News is a YA novel. I don't know you as a YA writer at all. You previously have written two fabulous series, Crime and Mystery. Is that correct?
Yes, the one my mum really likes.
Yeah. That's the Euphemia Martins. My mum thinks she's absolutely. I think she's the kind of protagonist that my mum wished she were in her younger days. That kind of idea.
I'd like to be her as well. And the other one is the Hope Stapleford Adventures. But yes, this is really different. And I've always liked children's writing, and I read children's writing, and I wanted to write something, but I've never really had a very good idea. And then the idea about fake news came, and I thought, I wonder about that, and it wouldn't leave me alone. And it also comes out of the fact that I have teenagers. Well, one of them just emerged into being, or just about to emerge, into a non-teenager. And I was thinking about all the things that they were facing growing up. And I was so angry during the, I think we'll have to call it the reign of the last American president, who I will not blame, as I won't give him any oxygen like that.
Not worthy of it.
No. And it's sort of like, what can I do to do with all the fake news, all the lies that are going on, and how it's affecting young people? And you have enough problems in your teenage years without having to worry about what's true, what isn't true, and hearing all these things. And there's no solid reality. I mean, news has always been a bit fluid, but it didn't so much become fluid as it's kind of disintegrated and changed entirely. Yeah.
It's really weird, isn't it? Because just thinking about our access to news, you know, I'm thinking when I was growing up, news was not something that I would engage with. It wasn't interesting, it wasn't fun, and there didn't seem to be a lot of it. You know, where you compare it to now, and on any form of social media, there is a constant change of news, of items, let alone, previous forms, newsprint, television news programs.
I think the biggest change is it's become bite-sized. So we only get small bits, and you will not follow what's going on unless you followed all the chunks. So you either engage in news or ignore news. You don't have that kind of, I'll just watch it at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I don't think I was particularly interested in news when I was younger, well, a teenager. But now it's really great, especially in Scotland, that kids are so interested in the political landscape, what's going on. They want to know what's happening. The curriculum has changed enough to try to get them to engage with what's going on in something wider than our country, what's going on in the world. And that's the whole idea of, the next generation is inheriting what we've made, and they need to make their next, what's going on next. So I thought I would write a book about teenagers, and they would attempt to take agency. They would attempt to take control of fake news and kind of try to affect not the entire world. They're really, really fairly realistic, but just their area, their city. They were going to try and change the views of fake news in their area. And I think that was a great idea. And I think maybe a lot of teenagers probably thought about things like this. This lot, however, really get in over their heads.
So hang on before you, because I'm going to get you to introduce us to this gang of world changers. I have a lot of hope for the future. In my own dealings with students and their conversations, I think all is certainly not lost, and we need to listen more. I think that's the thing, but. Caroline, tell me, and we should give a shout out to Daisy Jean. Hi, Daisy. Good to have you with us. Making that move, you said you wanted to do this, and I want to know the process of, has it been very different? For example, writing maybe in a different voice, a different time period. Have you had a different approach to your previous publications?
Well, yes, but I think a lot of it is that I had a lot of conversations with my teenagers, and I was talking to them about, they were saying what's going on as we were going through the last period of time and this period of time, and we'd sit down at the kitchen table and we would talk about what was happening in the world, and I would talk about the news sources that I'd found, what I knew, and just try to make things as clear as I knew how to. And there is a certain extent that one of them once said, can we have dinner without politics? So I said, fine, right? Next dinner time, it's going to be all the sweets we liked. And we did nothing but talk about sweets and all the sweets. And we were talking about sweets. And at the end of it, said, please, politics. So they missed it. But I think it is a growing process. It was an idea, but I think the idea came from the fact that I was dealing with my own children and trying to give them an understanding as best as I could of what was going on in the world, that there was hope, that we as individuals still had agency, and what we could look forward to. And just also, when you look at something on the internet, they're both very internet savvy, but we went through all the things about how can this be a trusted news source? How can this be? How do we verify something as much as we can? And, they know that a long time ago, I was also a journalist. And when I was a journalist and there was a crisis, we were working newspapers. There was an awful lot of guessing about what was going on. If you remember a very, very old series called Drop the Dead Donkey, I thought that was quite relevant. Whereas my parents would have believed in the authority of print, the authority of radio, where what you hear from the news is true. And this all sounds very dull. But it's not dull. It's not. The book's not dull. It's just about finding your way in a really confusing world where you want to know something is true and firm and hold on to that. But at the same time, you don't really know who you are yet either. So these two things are happening in parallel. And, I think modern teenagers are having an awful time. So I think, as much as anything, it came out of conversations with the kids, then it came out with the idea. And then when I was writing it, I have written it very differently in that I wanted to involve all the children so that I didn't do a normal well, young people, they're not children, a different structure, so that you're with people for a little while and then you're with someone else. And things sort of mount up in very small chapters and then in big chapters. And the idea of that, more than anything, was because the book is dedicated to my younger son, who doesn't read, because he likes screens. And he knows all about story, but he just doesn't read. And I thought, how can I make the book more appealing as well? Let's give it in bite-sized pieces. So if your life is really busy, you can still have a little bit.
You can take it, yeah.
Bit like copying news, and then but you can come back when you want. So obviously you can have it in paper form, or you can have it in electronic form, but you can come back, and if you want to sit down and read half a dozen bits, you can. But if you just have 5 minutes, and hopefully I've kept it interesting enough that when you read one bit, you want to know what's going on elsewhere. That whole thing of not quite meanwhile back at the ranch, but sort of like what's going on with the others. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's very much, the idea of, these protagonists. It's not just one person that we're following, their different experiences, how they function together. And I think, yeah, I think it rolls along so well, and the turning of the page is so easy, because you want to find out, okay, so this is happening to one of the, and then it moves into this, so when are we going to go back to that? And you just keep turning the page. And I really, again, I love that idea of challenging people. I think this is the thing it's what I see, that young people are willing to challenge way more maybe than we were. You spoke about the idea of accepting. Like your parents' generation, they accepted what those in authority said, and it made me think about school textbooks, history textbooks. How history written from one side, and we digested and we learned and we read, but we never really questioned, was this the experience of people in Africa, in India, in China?
I'm smiling because the first reading I was going to do actually engages with that.
Serendipity. I love this. And do you know what? I think this is the perfect moment. You've mentioned it. Let's whet the viewer's appetite. Take us to the novel.
Right. Well, this is a section when Mickey, who is actually the only female protagonist, though there are lots of other women in the story, who is coming into a history class that is run by Mr. Deacon. We've all, I think most of us had a Mr. Deacon, and probably will have a Mr. Deacon if we're at school at the moment. Mr. Deacon's big problem is he's only 5'2". So while he can deal with kids when they're in year 1 and year 2, as they get bigger, he has to find a way of controlling them. So he's developed his own style, and Mickey is coming into his classroom late. "I'm sorry, Mr. Deacon," said Mickey, pushing her way through the row of desks and not reacting when her book-filled satchel unintentionally connected with Mark Stewart's head. "Bitch," hissed Stewart, but she moved on before he could reach out a hand to pinch her, or worse. "I must stop you there, Miss Barton. Whatever excuse you have prepared, kindly abandon it. I have no interest in any of your tiny little lives outside of this classroom. In here, history is all, and as far as I am aware, none of you have yet done anything worthy enough to be noted in the annals of history. Or am I mistaken?" Deacon's gaze swept around the room with a haughty expression. As everyone else was sitting and he was standing, for once he could actually look down his nose at them. "Not yet, Mr. Deacon, sir. Give me time," said Rory. Mickey smiled at him, glad someone else was taking the spotlight off her. Today, Rory's blonde hair stood on end and had pink streaks. He wore his yellow-framed specs that emphasised his large brown eyes, giving him a wide-eyed, innocent look that was in complete contrast to his general demeanour. "I think it unlikely you achieve as much as a footnote in history, Rory," said Deacon. "But if you do, what an odd footnote it will be. Multi-hued and attention-seeking, one presumes." "Oh, you know me, sir. I love the spotlight," said Rory. Deacon gave him a tight little smile. "Well, unless you desire to look up the one outside the head's office, I suggest you kindly shut it, and let me continue to install what little learning is possible into your tiny little minds. Now, what would you say, Jonas? was the dominant political party at the time. Jonas didn't answer. Everyone looked round to see Jonas had his head down on his desk. He gave the tiniest snore. "Jonas," said Deacon sharply. Jonas jerked awake. "I do apologise," said Deacon. "Are we disturbing your nap time? Only I was under the impression this was meant to be a history class." A nervous whinny of laughter went around the room as the more nervous pupils attempted to show they were on the teacher's side. "Sorry, sir," said Jonas. Mickey could see his face was pale as milk and his eyes bleary. He was clearly not in a good way. "I didn't sleep well last night," he said. Deacon moved down the rows of desks, stopping to drum his fingers on the desk of the girl in front of Jonas. "What did I say to Miss Barton, Miss Klein?" he asked. Susan Klein brushed her long hair unnecessarily back from her face and said in an overly sweet voice, "That outside these walls, you are uninterested in our lives." "Tiny little lives," corrected Deacon. "But yes, Miss Klein, you are essentially correct. Kindly do not wear mascara again in my class. It makes me think your eyes are being attacked by spiders, as well as being against school rules." Susan Klein flushed red. "Propaganda by the West during World War I. Anybody?" "Inside the British Empire or outside it?" said Mickey without raising her hand.
Just exactly what we were talking about. But thank you. It is lovely to hear. I always enjoy hearing you read, but it's lovely to hear you read from this new text. And yeah, that classroom scenario is is very, very familiar. Now, I wonder if you would be so good as to introduce us to these news explorers, I like to call them. Who are your main protagonists in the novel?
A certain amount of it I want you to discover because they discover each other. But Mickey, who you just met there, Mickey is known throughout the school of having parents who have decided to become eco-warriors, and they spend a lot of their time going to various fairs and selling eco-type things and making videos of themselves bouncing on trampolines while talking about soil toilets. Consequently, Mickey does her best not to watch social media anymore and has also developed quite an aggressive personality at school. But she is very driven by justice and truth. She has a dog she adores, and her parents want her to leave school and engage with the real world, despite the fact both of them went to university. But Mickey has very different plans, and a lot of the story is about, for her, how she gets to manage those different plans and find her way out of what is feels at first a very trapped scenario. Now, who next? Jonas. Jonas's father left him when his mother was diagnosed with MS. Jonas is very worried that his mother, because she has good days and bad days, might be taken into some kind of facility and that he doesn't care. Neither he nor his mother want this, so they've tried very hard to keep it a secret. And Jonas is her carer, which is why he can't stay awake in class. However, there is something that happens that means this all comes to the fore. And you'll hear a bit about that in the second reading. Our third one is Rory. These three are all much of an age. They're around about the same year at school. Rory is adorable. He comes from a large family. I don't know if he wants me to call him him, but he doesn't want me to call him her either. We know right from the start that he writes a diary when he comes home every day, describing his day as if it would have been if he'd been female. He steals his sister's makeup. He's loud and flamboyant, but inside he's really confused. He doesn't know who he is or what he wants to be, and he does get bullied, partly because he doesn't let anybody in. And with what happens to this little group, he does start to let people in, and that it doesn't answer all his questions by any means, but it makes him feel a lot stronger. And then, of course, we have evil little Leon. He's not really evil. He's just has his own agenda, and he's the second reading. Leon is much younger. He got into high school early. He's a computer genius, and he is obsessed with joining MI5. I don't know if you know, they now put adverts in the newspaper saying, do you want to join MI5? It's not like it used to be. So this is, I couldn't write a book without spies in them somewhere. Anyway, so Leon thinks he's a computer genius. He wants to join MI5, and it's up to him to produce a backlog of work so he has a portfolio when he's old enough, and he can just turn up at the front door of MI5 and they will say, yes, we have to hire you and pay you lots of money. But he's also a little boy, and he still plays pranks on his sister, some really quite horrific pranks, and he does crazy things. Yeah, and he's quite instrumental in causing the chaos.
I wondered, as you wrote this novel, were these 4 protagonists, were they there all ready for you to put on the page, or did they appear at different times?
No, they all came up fully formed. There were little bits and pieces, like I wasn't entirely sure what Mickey's parents did. I just knew they did something that had embarrassed her hugely. But otherwise, I knew them pretty well. It was weird. I mean, I think the best characters, because no story is anything without characters, but I think the best characters are the ones that kind of sort of pop up and it makes me sound mad, but start talking to you and chatting away, and you know what they would do. So you could just kind of like start them rolling, and they're off doing their stuff. And I knew that the 3 of them, that Jonas and Mickey and Rory, had their own agendas, had really good reasons for what they were doing. And I knew that as soon as Leon got involved, it was going to be real trouble.
The strands then, and developing those, and so your characters are there, but then I always marvel at this, you know, four characters, 4 very different characters. How did you manage to ensure, which you do, that the voices are unique? It's not just here are 4 young people and the voices really are interchangeable. I mean, without wishing to give any sort of like secrets away, they just
feel my friends. They're not in real life, but they are characters I've created who have become my friends. And you recognize in your friends that they're different people and that they talk in different ways generally. And they are, I mean, I have a background in psychology, psychotherapy. I've always been interested in how people kind of come together and how they work. So I suppose I do spend a lot of time thinking about them to make sure that they are whole people. So, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, what they think about things, what's important to them at this time. And the difference is, of course, thinking about them as teenagers, because teenagers obviously don't think like adults. But I've been living the experience with mine. I find that in general, teenagers can be very hopeful. They're often really generous. Sometimes when they're frightened, they can be aggressive. And we tend to think about what's happening to them until you remind them that there is a bigger picture. And in my experience, they then sort of try to take a bigger picture on board. But because so much is going on, you mean your body's changing, your mind's changing, your role's changing in society, you're starting to make up your mind where you need to go next. I think is crazy to have to make that up in that early in life.
Yeah.
You've got so much going on that you have to think a lot about yourself, who you are and who you want to be. And occasionally you get shaken out of that to look at something and you think, right, I'm going to change that as well. And sort of like, you know, how like being a teenager. Yeah, I'm not going back, except in my writing.
Yes, yeah. And what a wonderful way to explore it. Now, as viewers who are with us, you know, for other Honey and Stag events are aware, we normally try to bring on other authors as well, or special guests, that our celebrated author, there can be some interaction. So we talked amongst ourselves and we thought it would be really good if we could bring on some other YA authors and you just have a look at that genre. And so it gives me great pleasure. I'm going to welcome into the studio, and then Caroline and the authors, I'll leave you three to have your authorly chat, and I'll be back with you later. But please, everybody, if you'll welcome into the studio, Alex Nye and Philip Caveney.
Hi there.
Hello. It's lovely to see you both.
Hi, and you.
You are both much more experienced.
Oh, well, I really enjoyed your readings, by the way. They were really good. The voices are very good. Yeah.
Well, doing teenagers is a new one on me. But, yes, it is. I was just saying that you're both much more experienced young adult writers than me. And I think one of the things I wanted to talk about is how the world today relates to how we write. Because when we were growing up, I think roughly, it was usually the end of the world was the scenario. That was our big thing that hovered around our teenage years. It was sort of like we'll just disappear in a wall of smoke. But nowadays, teenagers have the climate warming, obviously, and Alex has fallen off. I'm sure she'll come back. And we also have the nothing is real, and how that influences our writing. Does it influence you, Philip, how you write?
Well, I think it does, but I was going to say that obviously I'm older than you and Alex. I mean, my early teens were spent in a rather strict boarding school in Peterborough. It was the summer of love and all that kind of stuff. This wonderful music coming from America, and I was missing it all. I couldn't wait to get out there and get into some of that. But now, I mean, I think you made an interesting point before, though, about characters, how important characters are to any piece of fiction. And I think, you do have to believe in your own characters. You have to think of them as real people. That's so much a part of writing fiction, I think, particularly YA.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because I think young people want to engage with other young people. They wouldn't necessarily want to engage with us. So we just put the characters out there instead. What about you, Alex? What do you find influences you? I mean, I'm thinking about pressures on teenagers today in writing. Yeah.
Well, it's impossible to understand I can't imagine what it's like being a teenager today. But my children are now in their 20s, so they kind of missed that phone generation thing, which they're quite glad of, But it's impossible to know what it's like to be a teenager. But I teach lots of teenagers. I do a lot of English tuition as well, and I don't know. Teenagers will always be teenagers, I mean, like children will always be children, but they are different in the sense that when we were young, there was this very much kind of, if anybody addressed you like an adult, I can remember the headmaster sitting next to me and asking me what I thought of the school at lunchtime, and I thought, the hell are you asking me that for? Whereas they're used to having things, we just kind of would go like that, whereas they're used to kind of dealing with I suppose they're used to having a voice, actually, is what I'm saying. And I suppose that, it was interesting what you were talking to Jackie about earlier, about teenagers not really challenging things and all the rest of it. But I think they did. I think when we were young, we did challenge very much, but in a very different way. We didn't always know that we were. And sometimes young people now can be almost more law-abiding than we were, because there was the whole punk music thing. Not that I'm saying that punk music, some of it was a bit, but the whole idea was that you were trying to shake things up a bit. And in many ways, I think young people aren't necessarily shaking it up as much as people did back then. I don't know if I'm right about that or not, to be honest. I think I don't know. It's just an idea.
No, I think it's interesting. I mean, with university level and things like that. In the past, I'm going way back now, but there were, it was sit-ins and protests, and people went on marches and things like that. And yes, you're right. In some ways, teenagers are more law-abiding now, but they're also more likely to stand up to a teacher and say, "I don't think that's right. I don't think we should look at history like this." It's kind of like. They're taking more agency for themselves, but maybe not so I don't know, in such a big way. Maybe it doesn't feel like that. I mean, I think part of being young is to challenge and protest what's going on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you know, if your protests are good and make a difference, then absolutely brilliant, they should be there. But you know, when you become an adult, you have that, or becoming an adult as a young person, you have that unique view on the world, where you've come from being a child, you're now looking at the adult world, you're looking at a world you are about to enter, but you're not quite part of yet, and you're thinking about what you like and don't like about it and what you want to change, and you're not worn down by years and years of living in the adult world. You want it right, and I think that's brilliant. We need them to do that.
I think it's often said about writers, isn't it, that writers essentially are people who have never grown up, and that there's that important thing of always sort of feeling in tune with that kind of thing, because you kind of haven't bowed down to accepting all those rules that everybody wants to impose on you.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I was talking earlier about talking to my kids about politics and stuff, and how wound up I get, and how much I sort of do that, and they're sort of like, "Calm down, Mum. Be sensible, Mum." And it's changed. "Oh, Mum, are you upset?" To "Come on, Mum, be a grown up."
I definitely completely relate to that. But I've just, I just haven't grown up, basically. I mean, I just, it's ridiculous. I don't think I'm going to start growing up now. And it's just, I can relate totally. I can remember very, very clearly what it's like to be 13, to be 7, to be just as if it's, it's just that thing about you just never grow up, really.
Yeah, well, I was far too compliant. I was very good. I was the kind of child that asks for extra homework. I mean, this is really sad. And that was one of the points at which my boys were just sort of like, "Mum, God, what did you do? We're so ashamed of you." But I didn't. And my teenagers in the background saying he felt we wanted to disown me at that point. But I kind of feel that I'm doing my rebelling now. It's sort of like I should have done my rebelling then, but for whatever reasons, I was a good girl. I don't want to be a good girl anymore. I think that's the joy about writing YA, because you can explore all of that, all the things you wanted to do and didn't necessarily do. I did do some protesting. I made my headmaster cry once. I was quite proud of that. I should tell
no mean feat. I was going to say, though, that I mean, the other thing I always think about my teens, at the age of 13, I decided I wanted to be a writer, and nothing else was going to do for me. And the people that were queuing up to tell me, "Philip, be sensible. You can't do that. You'll never do that. Just give up now. Get a sensible job, And okay, maybe it took me 10 years to get that first book published, but the point was that I had that ambition as a teenager, and nothing was going to deter me from that.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I always said, people can't remember when I didn't say I wanted to be a writer, but I also said that I didn't know what I was going to do for a proper job to earn any money.
Yes.
But there is, and I think in some ways that's a little bit unfair, because if you are driven to be a writer, in that I was driven to be a writer, you were, and we'll hear from Alex in a second, as maybe she was, we kind of all knew where we were going. It wasn't going to be easy, but we knew where we were going, and I think that is a big advantage. But we are proof that you can follow and achieve what you want. So what about you? Did you always want to be a writer? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Right from the very beginning. I mean, it's all I wanted to do, the same as what you were saying, Philip, that nothing else would do. And I must admit, I didn't think it would be as hard as it turned out to be. It was quite difficult for the first few years. I thought it would be a lot easier. And I think it would have been if publishing hadn't changed. You like me, you will have hit that period when publishing became really difficult. Like, I used to get rejections that were nice personal rejections from editors that, like Lenny Goodman from Virago and things like that. And she would actually write to you personally. And then now it's a completely different kettle of fish, And yeah, but even so, yeah, there was nothing, and it was all like you were saying, Caroline. You'd think, well, what can I do that would fit in with secretly being a writer? You know, everything had to sort of fit around that, and you do get there eventually if you.
Yeah,
I think if you want something badly in life as well, you know, it's not just. I mean, with anything, you know, it's wanting it, isn't it? And it's like 85% is determination, probably.
Oh yes, there's a big part of luck, but luck comes the more you try, the more you keep going. But I also remember, because I was the kind of child that asked for extra homework, that when I was younger, I used to get bullied because I was a swot, right? And they sometimes were quite cruel, but I discovered a way to stop them bullying me. In that I said, if you stop doing this, I'll tell you a story. And I used to tell stories in the playgrounds to keep. I mean, they weren't serious bullies; they were enough to upset me. But we're not talking about, you know, people doing really nasty things. But it was sort of like, if I told a story, they actually sat down and behaved. And there was something there that I realised really early on, that story has such a power over almost everything. We live, and then I went on to study psychology, whatever. But you know, we live through stories. We spend our whole lives thinking about stories, and if it can be entertainment, it can be challenge, it can be. I mean, I like to think that my books leave people with questions, makes them think about things. I don't want to tell them anything, but story. I mean, other people say other things, but story to me is the most powerful thing going. So.
Yeah, everybody loves story, even if they don't read books. You know, as soon as you start to tell a story to children or adults, you know, if you turn whatever you are saying into, have I disappeared? I've disappeared on that. If you turn whatever you're saying into a story, then people, it's just more entertaining, isn't it? It was interesting what you were saying earlier as well about character and characters appearing in your mind, and you know, because yeah, it's. You know, I'm still learning now as well, you know, even now about character and how you have to sort of, you know, there's a temptation to want to kind of control them too much and put them, you know, sort of, not explaining this very well, but just try to over control them and cut off things that you think, oh no, they can't do that because that would be too ridiculous. And I'm learning at the moment to sort of let them go with the flow, you know, to let them do things like to be contradictory, because human beings aren't logical, are they? You know, and that sort of thing, you know, to be
their desires, don't they? They have objectives, they have motivations, they have desires. And well, my lot, I mean, you know, even if I had them on reins like horses, they would have just gone where they wanted in this story. And they were teenagers, they were strong, they were willful. Yeah,
but when one of your characters surprises you, you know, they do something you think, well, I didn't think they were going to do that, but let's go with it and see where it leads us to.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's always
interesting. That's what I meant. Yeah.
I think that's the kind of thing. And you know, where they're going is usually a lot more interesting than you thought they might go.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing as well, you know, you were saying about it being all very, when we were growing up, you know, there were all these, I mean, I don't know how old everybody is, but I know how old I am, obviously. And, you know, all those apocalyptic issues. For me, I mean, I just did not think I would live to see 16. I was absolutely convinced that I wouldn't live to see 16, you know, because it was this constant barrage about, you know, the whole nuclear predicament, everything. But I'm not sure how... I mean, the fact of the matter is that hasn't really gone away. You know, I remember when they signed the agreement, you know, Gorbachev and Reagan or whatever, in 1987. I can remember thinking, I can't believe they're actually going to be sensible. But then, lo and behold, another problem pops up and another problem. And, you know, you realize that life is always going to be like that. And I think we're still obviously living with that same apocalyptic idea. You know, if you look at... God, I've forgotten her name now. You know, the girl who, the Swedish girl, what's she called again? Greta
Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, and all that. You know, that even before this pandemic, there was still, you know, strong feelings of it being very, very an apocalyptic environment that we're living in, isn't it? You know, like the whole extinctions thing. And
Mm.
so I
Rebellion.
suppose they are similar problems. They just sort of shift a bit, don't they? But it's also true that what Jackie was saying, that back then there wasn't as much news. You just knew it was there, and it was very depressing. You just knew that. Whereas now, like you say, we've got a bombardment of news that we can't avoid, and we don't even know whether half of it's true.
I mean, I think Greta Thunberg is, you know, she's a remarkable young woman. I think she's truly amazing. But she got coverage in the news, which was great and definitely should have happened. But there are another sort of 12 odd teams that in various areas of the world have been doing the same kind of thing, and the news hasn't given them the air. But the interesting thing is these movers and shakers, that they are teenagers. And I feel very hopeful because of that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, actually, to feel hopeful like that. You know, that perhaps they will be able to do better than perhaps, but everybody has said that before, you know, the generation will do better the next time round. I hope they do, you know, I hope they don't get bogged down by mortgages and pensions and all the rest.
Well,
I think there is hope.
That is what you get bogged down by. That is what you get bogged down by. You can get bogged down by life and by things that you're going through. Yeah. But I think it's also it's worth being aware of the fact that despite all the awful things, we have actually made some progress. You know, we are. Yeah. There are good things that are happening. There are more women in the workforce. There are more Democrats back in America again, thank God. But there's also it definitely goes in waves. But there have been more waves of understanding and more ways of tolerance in a global sense, and I think they sometimes seem to emanate from rather than governments. And that's maybe the next kind of levels of change. The next generation will maybe change. But, you know, I'm thinking I am really grateful. I think you have both been wonderful. And I'm really glad to join the fledgling press stable with you and learn from your books and your experience too. Why don't you say, if people were going to start reading your books, which book should they start with? Give them a title. What should they start with?
Well, for me, I think the most recent one, the Sins of Ali Lawrence. It's all about Edinburgh. It's out now, and it's a kind of a twisted sort of fairy tale story, I think, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But I think everybody, would enjoy that.
What about you, Alex? What should they start with?
Well, I've got two here. Get them into the camera. Just these were both published about 2019, just before the lockdown, or before the whole thing that happened. And either of those really would be good. You know, that one is about Mary Shelley, Arguing with the Dead, and that's for adults, a historical novel. And the other one is a YA, When We Get to the Island, and sort of 39 steps kind of adventure across the wilds with, you know, issues about refugee issues in it and things like that.
Either of them. That's brilliant. So thank you both very much for sparing some of your evening to come on and chat with me.
See you. Good luck with the book.
It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully Jackie's going to join us. Hello, Jackie.
Back again with you.
We'll see you.
Thank you so much for a lovely conversation there between the authors. So good. And again, thanks to Alex and Philip for being part of tonight's celebration. I just managed to get the glass while you were talking as well. I wanted to celebrate you and wish you.
Thank you.
Do you have a wee beverage there?
I do. Thank you. Cheers.
To you.
It's
and
not
to fake news.
It's water.
So now,
you prepared earlier. Can we introduce the press?
We can indeed. I thought that would be a wonderful moment. But bring on the dedication.
Yes, this is my younger son, Xander, and fake news is dedicated to Xander. He didn't think I was going to dedicate it to him, but it is, isn't it? Yes.
Mhm.
So now he has to read it, don't you, darling?
Yes.
Xander, have you started it yet?
Not yet. I was going to wait till after it was properly launched.
I think he was hoping, you know, till it was real. Before it was real, he didn't have to do it.
Yeah, but now there's a commitment there, that has to be. I would at some other point really love to ask you when you've read it, which is your favourite part? Because I wonder if we might have, any bits in common there that we really liked. So if you let us know via your mum when you're done with it, and let's have a text back and forth about it, yeah?
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
He's a bit like Leon, I reckon. You don't know who that is yet.
Thank you very much. Not sure if you
Yeah.
compliment.
Yeah, you can say whether you confirm what your mum said or not about that.
I want to be a 5. I just meant computer. Very much a computer technical person.
That's not my expertise.
Anyway, you can hide now again. He's done his obligatory.
Wonderful. I mean, I've still got more questions to ask about fake news, but having made this book happen, and again, massive shout out to Fledgling Press,
Yes.
for taking on, your idea, and now it is a reality. It's out there in book form, and in e-form as well. Will there be more of this? Are you determined to do more?
I am going to write another YA for Fledgling Press. I have contracted to do that. It won't be with these characters, though. If people make enough noise, maybe I'd go back to them later. But I think they end in a place where we can all feel really comfortable about the story and optimistic. But no, now I've bitten the YA bug. Yeah, I think I'm going to stay. And I am enormously grateful to Claire Kane of Publishing Press for taking on the challenge of me as a YA writer, and for making the whole process so incredibly easy. It's been so easy to just do everything through. She's brilliant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think there's something else, I mean, that I'd just like to say about Fledgling Press is that, Claire seems to have an eye for a novel in whatever genre it be, but a novel of the now. It's, there's always something a little bit, on the edge. And I really appreciate that, because that if you pick up a Fledgling Press book, there's going to be something there that's going to stay with you. It'll resonate and it'll stay. So lovely. Now, to come back to the book, well, why don't we have, because I know you've got a second reading prepared.
Sure.
Why don't we have the second reading, and then I'll come back with a couple more questions.
Okay. This tells you a little bit about what Leon's agenda is, which you find out fairly early in the book. So I'm not giving too much away. He's sitting at home on his own at the moment, and he's typing up a report. And it says, Day 1 of infiltration. When my surveillance of the suspected insurgents' safe house was disturbed, I was forced to make a snap decision. I opted to go undercover using my persona of an over-curious but cute schoolboy. I persuaded the group to let me in. They had been discussing the phenomenon of fake news and how to combine it with counterintelligence of a sort. Although, of course, they didn't use that specific term. When Rory, an older boy prone to wearing garish colours in an exuberant manner, demanded to know what I had heard, I had to make a second snap decision. As the saying goes, the best lies are wrapped in the truth, and so that's what I told them. I expressed sympathy for their situation. Mickey was all for making me a peanut butter sandwich and letting me go. At this point, the other boy, Jonas, whose mother was recently exposed on the web as a criminal mastermind, said there was no point going ahead as I knew their plan. I confess, my natural instinct to take control took over, and I explained they did not have a plan, merely an idea. This led to some squabbling, but I managed to quieten them by suggesting we set up a website and put out fake news stories to lure in the local population. At our chosen time, the truth of each story would be revealed. I admit it's more or less what the boy Jonas had already suggested, but I made it sound workable. Rory was keen no individual was targeted. Mickey pointed out that none of them were web designers. At this point, I had to reveal my status as an overachiever for my age and explain that I could set up the website for them and oversee the dissemination of news. This caused further debate. But as Mickey's parents were away at some kind of hippie fair, we have decided to regroup later and take things further. I am, of course, interested only in exposing the safe house and the degree to which the 3 teenagers are involved in subversive interests. I believe that if I help them with the basics of their plan, I will uncover their true motivations and dastardly plots. In the meantime, I've warned them not to use their mobile phones, but to rely on landlines and direct verbal interactions to communicate. Mobile phones are too easily found by family members, and they leave trails that are hard to delete. I'd rather did nothing other than speak face to face, and from the blank looks I got mentioning landlines, I infer this will be what they do. I don't want them texting each other and leaving me out of the loop. Having limited their communication options, I feel certain that the situation is under control and I can move things forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, Alex has just said, yeah, brilliant readings, without a doubt. How about an audio book, Caroline? Would you do your own audio?
I would absolutely love to do my own audio. I have 1 credit on IMDb as a voice actor. I have done a little voice acting, so I would love to do my own audiobook if anybody ever let me. So
yes, Sarah Broadley. Hi, Sarah. Sarah says superb as well. Definitely such a treat. You know, I think you do. You make these characters come alive. Your character, you can hear there's different voices
in my head. So I mean, I don't do them as well as they do them themselves in my head, but I do my best. Yeah.
So fake news, and I wondered the kind of research that you did before. You know, the examples, and I don't want to give too much away.
This is a story in itself. Some of the fake news stories that the young people put up on their during their project, shall we call it for now, I was writing them. So I would write one, and then I used to write them, and then I used to check the internet. And the problem was that, however absurd I made them, the internet had already got them. And one of my favourite ones was don't use solar panels because they take energy from the sun. And I thought nobody will have written anything like that. Nobody could be that Oh yeah. There's a whole mass of people who happen to believe that's true and are going around making things white to reflect the sun's energy back to it so it doesn't go out. So that was, I learnt then to research on the internet and try and find a gap in the ridiculous stories. You know, flat earthers, really, they have nothing on some of the things that are out there. And of course, we know the earth isn't flat anyway, because all the cats would have knocked everything off.
Totally, of course they would. Which brings me to another question about the book. There's a 5th member of the crew, the dog. Yeah.
Red. Yeah.
Did you have a dilemma as you wrote as to whether it was going to be a cat or a dog?
No, because it needed to be something daft and friendly. Yeah. So no offense to dog kind, but only a dog would kind of put up with that kind of thing and be good natured and sweet. A cat there would have been bloodshed that wouldn't have worked in the plot at that point. So that was why it wasn't a cat.
And I love the fact how Red loves halloumi.
Yeah. It's really bad. Don't feed your dogs cheese. They love cheese. Don't feed your dogs cheese. But yes, he will follow Mickey around if she has a bowl of halloumi. If she wants him to go somewhere, she just picks up a bowl and he will follow. Yes.
So I'm aware of the time, and I know we could be in conversation all night, which is one of the sad things, that if we were in a place where drink could be taken together, I'm sure that the conversation would go on way into the night. But my last question that I have for you is, It's a cracking text, it really is. But again, without giving anything away, is there one part of it or one aspect that when you think of it, you just glow? You know, it's that crowning moment of the text.
I think it's what I think of as the climax of Rory's story, where he starts facing certain things. I love that bit. That's me.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you anything about it.
No, people will have to read for themselves which is the part of fake news that Caroline is most proud of. Yeah. Remind us again, it is available in print form, is it not?
It is indeed. It's
Wonderful.
available in all good bookshops. You're waiting a long time to say that. No, it really is. Claire's got it everywhere, from Waterstones to WH Smith, to also on the Fledgling Press website as well. It's everywhere, which is lovely. And it's also it's an ebook, yes, and it's an ebook everywhere as well. So you can get it in whatever form suits you best.
Wonderful, wonderful. It just remains for me to thank everybody that has joined us, and thank you to anybody who's going to watch our conversation together in the future. Thank you for tuning in to listen about what we enjoy most, and that is a book launch. And to you, Caroline, CJ Dunford, all the very best with fake news, yeah? Thank you for being with us.
Yes, huge thanks to you and Kelly for everything you've done. You've been brilliant.
A total pleasure. All the best.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Kelly, for looking after us. Thank you for a great night. See you soon.